Am I the jerk for exposing my coworker's lies about me in front of our entire team? I didn't plan to humiliate her in front of everyone. I truly didn't. But I also couldn't keep letting the lies slide. My hands were literally shaking when I finally snapped during our Monday morning team meeting, and now the entire office is in shock, including me. I, 34M, work as a senior developer at a mid-sized tech company. It's a pretty competitive environment where everyone's trying to prove themselves. For the past year, I've been dealing with a coworker, let's call her Jane, 29F, who seemed friendly at first but turned out to be something else. Jane and I were part of the same project team, and early on, I actually thought we got along well. We would grab coffee together, crack jokes about our boss, and even collaborate on code sometimes. I honestly never expected she'd have it in for me. The problem started about 6 months ago when I began noticing little things. For instance, I'd make a suggestion in a meeting, and it would get ignored, only for Jane to repeat the exact same idea later, and suddenly everyone loved it. At first, I brushed it off. It's not uncommon in our office culture for quieter voices to get overlooked until someone louder echoes them. I figured maybe I just needed to speak up more. But then there were instances where code I wrote, good code that I was proud of, mysteriously had bugs when Jane reviewed it. Bugs that I swear weren't there in my version. It was subtle stuff. A missing semicolon here, a changed variable name there. It started making me look sloppy. I began doubting myself, wondering if I was losing my attention to detail. Over time, the mistakes associated with my work stacked up. Our project manager, Dan, 45M, pulled me aside a few times to ask what was going on with me. He said Jane had brought some issues to his attention, missed deadlines, which I swear I didn't miss, and errors in my deliverables. I was baffled. I met every deadline I knew of, and any errors that did slip through, I fixed immediately. So I started keeping meticulous records. I saved copies of every email, tracked all my deadlines on a personal calendar, and even kept diffs of my code changes on a private repo. I was getting paranoid, which isn't a fun headspace to be in at work. Then came the incident that really set the stage for my blow-up. About 2 months ago, our team was finalizing a big feature for a client. I had done the bulk of the back-end work, and Jane was handling the front end. We were supposed to integrate and test everything before a Friday demo. On Wednesday, Jane tells the team that my part isn't done, that I'm holding everyone up. I was stunned, because not only was my part done, I'd finished it early and sent it to her the previous week. When I tried to speak up, she talked over me, saying I'm misremembering and maybe I should double-check. Dan looked disappointed in me, and the client demo was at risk. I went back to my desk feeling like I was going crazy. Luckily, I had proof. I found the email where I had sent Jane my completed code, days before. Attached was the time-stamped file. I immediately forwarded that email to Dan, with Jane CC'd, politely saying, as per the attached email from last week, the back-end component was delivered to Jane on X date. I tried to keep it factual and professional. Jane shot back some excuse about must have missed that email, but the damage was done. Dan knew I wasn't the one holding us up. The demo was still delayed because apparently Jane wasn't finished with her part. But interestingly, Dan didn't call her out the same way. It was like everyone was tiptoeing around her. After that, Jane's attitude toward me changed dramatically. She stopped pretending to be friendly. No more coffee chats. Fine, whatever, I didn't care to be buddies with someone who tried to throw me under the bus. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. She began openly criticizing my work in team channels, often unjustly. If a minor bug popped up in the app, which is normal in development, she'd publicly tag me and say something like, "This is probably from OP's code, can you check?" Even if it wasn't from my area at all. It was humiliating. People started privately asking me if I was okay, if I was having a rough time or something, because from an outside perspective, I looked like a mess-up who kept making mistakes that poor Jane had to keep catching. I tried talking to Jane one-on-one after one particularly nasty team chat message she sent. I calmly asked her why she was constantly singling me out. She smirked and said, "I'm just making sure everything's perfect for the project. Don't take it personally." I told her it felt personal. She then suggested, maybe I'm not cut out for this high-pressure environment if I can't handle a little feedback. It took every ounce of self-control not to blow up at her right then. Instead, I went to Dan and explained that I felt I was being unfairly targeted by Jane. He seemed sympathetic but kinda helpless. He said Jane is one of our star performers. Maybe she just has high standards. Try not to let it get to you. That was it. I felt like banging my head against a wall. I considered going to HR at that point. But what would I say? That my coworker is being mean to me? She was smart enough not to leave solid proof of harassment. Her messages could be played off as work-related, her lies as misunderstandings. I also worried about making a formal complaint against someone who was clearly management's favorite. Jane had been with the company only 2 years, but had a reputation as this whiz-kid developer who saved a big project last year. I'd been there 5 years, quietly working hard without much fanfare. It was like she had the spotlight and I was invisible. except when she needed a scapegoat. At this point, I was miserable going into work every day. I dreaded team meetings, expecting another public jab from Jane. My anxiety was through the roof. My wife noticed I was barely sleeping and constantly on edge. I finally told her some of what was going on. She was shocked, told me I needed to stand up for myself or escalate this because it wasn't normal. She even suggested maybe Jane felt threatened by me and was trying to edge me out. That hadn't really occurred to me fully until she said it. I knew our company was competitive, but the idea of a coworker actively sabotaging me still felt surreal. However, looking at the pattern, it did seem like Jane wanted me to appear incompetent, possibly to knock me out of contention for a promotion that was coming up. Ah, yes, the promotion. Our team had a lead developer position opening soon, a role above mine but below Dan's. I had been quietly hoping to get it. I'd been there longer than anyone else on the team and consistently had good performance reviews. Jane obviously had her eye on it too. In fact, she had outright mentioned how she wanted to take on more leadership. It all started to click. She wanted that job, and she wanted to make sure I wasn't a threat. Realizing this made me both angry and oddly relieved. At least it wasn't all in my head. There was a reason she was doing this. A nasty, selfish reason, but a reason nonetheless. I doubled down on collecting evidence. Every time Jane said something about me that I could disprove, I saved it. I had a folder in my personal Google Drive with screenshots of our Slack conversations, copies of emails, anything I could gather. I didn't even fully know what I was going to do with it yet. Part of me fantasized about dropping a truth bomb in a meeting or sending it anonymously to HR. Fast forward to this morning, our regular Monday team meeting. It was virtual and in person. Some of us in the conference room, some on Zoom. I was physically present with a few colleagues, including Jane and Dan, while others dialed in. We were reviewing the latest sprint tasks and progress. Things were actually going okay until Jane piped up with this gem. Before we move on, I want to address an issue with the API integration. I'm still waiting on OP to fix the endpoints that were broken. It's causing delays for my side of the work. I froze when she said that. Because not only had I fixed those endpoints, I did so 2 days ago. And I Slack messaged her that they were ready. And she even acknowledged it with a thumbs up emoji. It was a small thing in the grand scheme. But it was yet another lie. A bold-faced lie in front of everyone. I could see Dan's face fall, like, here we go again, OP dropping the ball. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt a hot wave of anger and adrenaline wash over me. My voice shook, but I spoke up, probably louder than I intended. No, that's not true. The room went silent. On the Zoom, a few muted icons blinked, probably people going, what's happening? Jane looked at me with fake confusion. What do you mean it's not true? I don't have the fixes yet, she said, her tone all innocent. My heart was pounding. I mean, I did fix the endpoints. On Saturday. And you know that, Jane, because I told you, and you reacted. She laughed, like actually gave a short laugh, and said, OP, if you did that, I must have somehow missed it. Did you email me? People were looking at me like I was some kind of liar or fool. It was humiliating and infuriating all at once. I fumbled with my laptop, pulling up our Slack chat. On the big screen, since we were connected to show slides, I quickly navigated to our direct conversation from Saturday. I found the message, hey Jane, the API endpoints are all set now. Let me know if you need anything else, and right below it, her single thumbs up reaction. In the heat of the moment, I clicked share screen before I could think it through. Suddenly, the entire meeting could see my screen, the Slack window, with that message and her reaction. Is that you not knowing I fixed it? I asked, my voice icier than I'd ever heard it. The silence in the conference room was palpable. Jane's face went pale. Dan looked really surprised. One of our remote colleagues unmuted and said, oh, and then quickly muted again. Jane started to stammer. I must have forgotten. Okay, maybe that's on me, but there's been so many issues to track. You can't blame me for losing one message. She was trying to recover, but I wasn't about to let it go. Not this time. You didn't forget, I snapped. This isn't the first time, Jane. You keep telling the team I'm not doing my job, and I'm sick of it. My voice was rising, and I heard it crack with emotion. Months of frustration pouring out. I clicked frantically through my folder, opening screenshots and emails I'd saved, dragging them onto the screen for all to see like a man possessed. I showed the email where I sent her the code. That time she claimed I hadn't. I showed a snippet of code with the weird mistakes that weren't in my original commit history. I even had a screenshot of a Slack message where she told another coworker to double-check my work because OP tends to be sloppy. That one I got because the coworker showed me, and I had asked him to forward it to me for my records. It was messy, and not at all how one should handle things in a professional setting, I'll admit that. I was literally airing all our dirty laundry in front of everyone. People on the call were either stunned silent or saying awkward things like, guys, maybe this should be a private discussion. Dan at first was like, okay, let's calm down, but I couldn't calm down. I was on a roll. Each piece of evidence I threw up on that screen felt like vindication, like bricks off my chest. Jane got defensive, of course. She said, "This is out of context." And, "I never said you were sloppy, that was a misunderstanding." She tried to explain away each screenshot, but she sounded panicked. Because she knew, and I knew there was no out of context here, she had been caught. The confrontation reached a fever pitch with me practically yelling, "Why have you been doing this to me? Is it the promotion? Do you hate me that much?" There it was. I said it. I put motives out there in front of everyone. A couple of people gasped or said, "Whoa." Dan finally raised his voice, telling both of us, "Enough. This is not the time or place." I realized my face was hot, and I was on the verge of tears. Anger tears, which is so embarrassing at work. I stopped talking, breathing hard. There was this awful tension. And then Jane, in a voice dripping with angry sarcasm, said something that I think is the moment I might have become the asshole, or at least crossed the line. "You want to know why, OP? Fine. You're such a saint, right, Mr. Perfect? How about how you come in late and leave early while the rest of us pick up your slack? How you half-ass your code and I have to fix it? You think I lie? Maybe I'm just tired of covering for you." That was a lie and a low blow. I do sometimes come in a bit later, true, but I also often stay late or work from home at night, and I deliver on my tasks. But she was making me out to be the slacker and her the martyr. I started to refute that, but she steamrolled on, voice rising, almost hysterical laugh tinging her words. "You want to play the victim? I've watched you cozy up to Dan thinking you deserve that promotion, but you're not a leader. You're just loud. All you do is talk a big game and the rest of us get things done." Now here's the thing. None of that is true from my perspective, but hearing her spit it out so venomously, in front of everyone, I suddenly felt doubt. Was that how she saw me? How others might see me? Me chatting with Dan, like I do with everyone, could have looked like sucking up? I was stunned into silence for a moment. Dan intervened again, telling Jane that's enough. She grabbed her laptop and said, "I'm not doing this," and abruptly left the conference room, slamming the door. So now she was gone, and the meeting was effectively blown up. The people on Zoom were all either silent or sort of awkwardly murmuring. Dan looked at me with this mix of anger and disappointment, said something about, "We'll discuss this later," and told everyone to take a 5-minute break. The meeting pretty much ended there anyway. I sat there in the empty conference room as everyone filed out, my hands still shaking. I felt a mix of triumph and absolute dread. On one hand, I finally stood up for myself and showed everyone the truth that I'd been dealing with. On the other hand, I just caused a giant scene at work and essentially publicly accused a colleague of serious misconduct in front of our boss and teammates. And I probably looked unhinged doing it. A few minutes later, Dan came back in and quietly asked me to come to his office. I felt like a kid being called to the principal. In his office, he shut the door and sighed, rubbing his temples. He said, "That was completely inappropriate. I understand you're frustrated, but that was not okay." I responded, voice still shaking. "What's not okay is what she's been doing to me for months." I started to defend myself, but he cut me off. He said, "I'll look into this, but you should have come to me or HR properly, not whatever that was." I told him I did come to him, and nothing changed. He looked a bit guilty at that, I'll admit. He then said HR would need to get involved now, because this was a public outburst with serious accusations. He asked me to send him all the evidence I had so he could review it. I agreed, though I worried what HR would really do. Corporate HR tends to protect the company, not necessarily the truth. As I left Dan's office, I could see through the glass walls that a few coworkers were whispering and looking at me. The rumor mill was already churning, I'm sure. My closest work friend, Leo, approached me cautiously and asked if I was okay. He said that was intense and that he had no idea Jane was doing all that. He seemed supportive but also worried for me. I just nodded and said I'd talk later, I needed some air. I walked out of the building and sat in my car, just breathing, adrenaline still coursing. That's when it really hit me what I'd done. I likely burned my relationship with not just Jane but others too. Jane is popular with some teammates. She often goes out for drinks with them. I usually don't. I have family to get home to. I wonder what they're thinking now. And Dan, he liked us both, I think. He relied on both of us. Now there's a huge rift in his team and an HR headache. Sitting in the car, I had a moment of panic like, oh God, am I going to get fired for this? I doubt they'd fire me outright because I'd probably have a case for retaliation if they did, given I have evidence of her misconduct. But maybe I really handled it in the worst possible way. I could have waited and compiled everything and gone to HR formally. Instead, I went nuclear in front of everyone. I also thought about Jane. Why couldn't she have just been a decent person? Part of me felt bad seeing how panicked she looked when I showed the evidence. For a split second when she left the room, I almost felt like I bullied her. Which is twisted, I know, considering she brought it on herself. But still, it was a public flogging. And the thing she said about me not being a leader and her covering for my slack, it keeps replaying in my head. Was any part of that true? Some colleagues did sometimes joke I was cruising because I have a laid-back demeanor. Did I misread the situation and maybe I really am not pulling my weight? No, that doesn't justify her lying or sabotaging. I'm spinning in circles, questioning myself. I drove home midday without even going back to my desk. I just couldn't sit there. I told Dan I needed the rest of the day and he said fine. On the way, I called my wife and told her briefly what happened. She was shocked but said good for you, she had it coming. Then she worried about the consequences and told me to document everything, which I have. Now I'm at home writing this because I honestly don't know what to think. On one hand, I feel vindicated that people know the truth now. On the other, I very publicly blew up and probably scared half my team in the process. Professionalism went out the window. I'm expecting an email from HR any minute. Or maybe Jane beat me to it and reported me for harassment or creating a hostile environment. I don't know. She left, basically saying she refused to engage, which ironically makes me look like the aggressor. I keep replaying the moment she stormed out and that last look she gave me. It wasn't just anger. It almost looked like hurt and fear. Did I go too far? Was there something more going on with her? I always saw her as this confident, maybe arrogant person. But in that moment, she looked almost broken? I'm confused. So here I am. I exposed my coworker's lies in front of everyone. No formal investigation, no private mediation. I just dropped it all like a bomb in the middle of a meeting. It felt good. And it also feels awful now that the dust is settling. If she was lying and sabotaging me, she deserved to be called out, right? But doing it so publicly, that might have been an asshole move. My career at this company is probably permanently marred by this drama now. If Jane keeps her job, how can we ever work together again? If she doesn't, well, I might have contributed to someone getting fired, even if justified. It's a mess. I never wanted this kind of confrontation. I'm not the type who likes drama. But I was pushed and finally snapped. Is that understandable or inexcusable? I guess I'm posting here because I genuinely need an outside perspective. Was I the asshole for how I handled this? Should I have kept it one-on-one or just with management instead of blowing up the whole team meeting to expose her? Did I overreact? I feel like I might have just become the villain of my own workplace story. So Reddit, AITA, Update 1 week later. First off, I want to say thank you for all the comments and messages on my post. I never expected it to blow up like it did. It was a mixed bag of feedback. Some said I was justified. Many said I handled it poorly. Fair enough. Reading your perspectives was eye-opening and helped me prepare for what came next. It's been about a week since the blow-up, and a lot has happened. The day after my post, I had a meeting with HR and Dan. I went in anxious but armed with all my evidence. The HR rep, let's call her Kelly, had me go over everything that happened, from the months of issues to the meeting blow-up. I showed her the emails and screenshots. Dan mostly stayed quiet, but he did acknowledge that there had been tension between Jane and me for a while. Kelly said they'd investigate further, including talking to Jane and other team members. I did apologize for losing my cool in the meeting, but I also stressed that I felt cornered. Kelly nodded and said something about understanding there were underlying issues that led to the incident. I left that meeting feeling cautiously hopeful. Over the next few days, Jane wasn't in the office. I heard she was working from home due to stress. Meanwhile, HR spoke to several teammates. A couple of them told me privately that they backed me up, confirming Jane often unfairly criticized me. That made me feel a bit better, like at least I wasn't crazy, and others saw it too. Then yesterday, I was called into another HR meeting, this time with Jane present. Walking into that room and seeing her was surreal. She wouldn't even look at me. Kelly said this wasn't a mediation, just a fact-finding discussion. They asked Jane about specific incidents I'd reported. Jane admitted to some things, but always with an excuse. Oh, I must have missed that email. Or, I was just trying to keep the project on track. I was trying to stay composed, but it was hard. At one point, I finally said, let's be honest, you didn't miss anything. You lied. HR told me to keep it professional. That's when Jane's demeanor shifted, and she got teary-eyed. She said she felt I was hostile to her, and she was just trying to do her job. She claimed I resented her, and that by the time of the meeting, she was genuinely afraid I'd lash out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was painting herself as the victim. I flat out denied being hostile in any way outside of that one meeting blow-up. The meeting ended with HR saying they'd be in touch after reviewing everything. I walked out feeling like the narrative had been flipped. Jane was acting like I was the bully. This morning, I got an email from HR with their initial findings. It basically said both Jane and I acted inappropriately. We're both getting formal reprimands for unprofessional conduct. They also are reassigning one of us, me, to a different project so we don't have to work together directly for now. And importantly, it mentioned that Jane filed a complaint against me, claiming I created a hostile work environment for her, so their investigation into that is ongoing. In short, I'm simultaneously vindicated, she got reprimanded, and under scrutiny, I'm being investigated because of her complaint. It's absurd and infuriating. I understand, HR has to cover all bases, but it feels like I'm being punished for being the victim. For now, Dan suggested I work from home and avoid contact with Jane. Fine by me, I don't want to see her anyway. But it still feels like a semi-punishment. The team knows something went down. Some coworkers have been supportive. Leo keeps checking on me, but I sense others are keeping their distance. Maybe they think I'm the office drama king now. One colleague told me there's a rumor that I exploded on Jane out of nowhere and that she's been crying to people about feeling unsafe. Hearing that made my blood boil. But what can I do? Correcting the story might just look like more aggression from me. Meanwhile, the promotion both Jane and I were gunning for is definitely off the table now for the foreseeable future. No way management wants to reward either of us while this mess is hanging over the team. I'm trying to keep my head up. My wife says I need to stick it out and let the process play out. She even asked if I should start applying elsewhere, but I hate that it's come to that. I don't want to be forced out when I've done nothing wrong, aside from the blow-up itself. I plan to stay. I love my job, at least the work itself, and I don't want to lose it because of this. But it's so frustrating that, after all her lies, I'm the one who has to watch my step. I'm not sure how this will end. She might actually get away with turning the tables on me. I stood up for myself, and now I'm the one under the microscope. This isn't over. Update 2, final update. It's been about a month since my last update, and I wish I had a neat, happy ending. Instead, things are messy, and I'm left with mixed feelings. Here's what's happened since. HR concluded their investigation. They found no basis for Jane's hostile environment complaint against me, because it was BS. But they also weren't exactly crowing that I was right. The official line was that we had a conflict stemming from miscommunications on both sides. In other words, they both sided it. We each got a reprimand on file, and the case is closed. Shortly after that, Jane resigned. Well, resigned is the word used, though I suspect she was pushed to do so quietly. I wasn't privy to those discussions, obviously. All I know is one day we got an email announcement that Jane decided to pursue opportunities outside the company and thanking her for her contributions. Just a generic send-off. No mention of any wrongdoing. I heard through the grapevine that she got a decent severance package in exchange for not kicking up any more fuss. So, she's basically gone with a pretty parachute. When that email went out, I had very conflicted feelings. I felt relief. Sure, she's out of my life, at least in the day-to-day sense. But I was also furious seeing her being gently praised on her way out after what she did. Some coworkers were actually planning a little farewell lunch for her. I did not attend, obviously. It boggled my mind. Like, I know not everyone knew the full story, but plenty saw that blow-up meeting. Still, a few of her work friends acted like she was the victim somehow. Or at least they treated the whole thing as, just a shame it didn't work out. One colleague told me that at the lunch, Jane was apparently in tears saying she loved working with the team but felt she had been mistreated. Whatever. Hearing that made me want to punch a wall. But I stayed out of it. No good could come from me inserting myself there. Since Jane left, I've been back in the office more, trying to move on. But things are not the same. The whole incident left a stain. For one, the promotion we both were in line for has been put on hold indefinitely. Management basically doesn't want to talk about it. I suspect they're going to quietly hire someone from outside in a few months. So that opportunity is likely gone for me, all because of this drama. Dan, my manager, has been different. He's polite, but cold. Before, he used to chat with me about projects or even life. Now it's strictly business. Part of me wonders if he's resentful about how it all went down. Losing Jane, who, despite everything, was a high performer work-wise, and dealing with the headache. I tried once to thank him for being fair during the investigation, and he just said, "Let's put it behind us and focus on work." Ouch. The team dynamic is weird too. Most people act normal, but I occasionally sense that awkward vibe when I enter a room, like I walked in on people talking about it. My close friend Leo assures me I'm not imagining it. Apparently a couple of Jane's buddies in the office still think I overreacted and basically ran her out. Meanwhile, others are glad she's gone. It's a quiet divide that nobody says straight out, but I can feel it. I also found out a small, unsettling detail. Jane wasn't just some random coworker. Rumor is, she was pretty well connected. One story is that she was friends with the CTO's daughter from college. I don't know if that's true, but if it is, it could explain how she managed to charm her way around here. It also makes me worried that she could trash my reputation through those connections as she moves on. Maybe that's paranoid, but after all this, can you blame me? Professionally, I'm trying to keep my head down and rebuild trust. I'm delivering good work, as I always did, but I feel this unspoken pressure, like I have to prove I'm not some loose cannon. The other day, I had a code review with some senior devs and I found myself bending over backwards to be agreeable and open to critique, something I normally do anyway, but now it's like I'm hyper aware of not coming across as difficult. This whole thing really shook me. As for Jane, I have no idea where she went. She scrubbed her LinkedIn for a bit, then popped up as open to work. I wouldn't be surprised if she lands a good job soon. She had the skills and a shiny resume. I just hope she doesn't pull the same stunts on someone else. Or maybe I do hope she does and finally faces real consequences. I don't know. It's a messed up mix of resentment and pity I have for her. One thing that keeps gnawing at me. In all of this, I never got an apology, not that I expected one. And I never got a clear, you were right, from management. They dealt with it, yes, but it feels like they did it to stop the drama, not to stand up for what's right. It's like Justice Light. Meanwhile, I did get labeled as part of the problem due to my outburst, and that label isn't going away easily.